This Top Story series was created to highlight entrepreneurs in our local community who may serve as inspiration for students and the next generation of entrepreneurs. We're really fortunate to have three amazing people here today, Rich Matsui, who is our featured guest, and two fellow tech entrepreneurs, Jonathan and Trung. I assume Trung will be conducting the interview. They are all successful founders who are very passionate about helping entrepreneurs in Hawaii. So with that, I would like Trung to please introduce yourself and then take over the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
I have to correct one thing. I am not a successful tech entrepreneur. I've started businesses, I've done tech, but the tech thing did not work. But that's okay. One of the things I actually did a while ago was I used to host a podcast, and I interviewed a lot of guests and got them to answer a lot of questions about themselves, their stories. And what I try to do is, because these podcasts were long, I really wanted the guests to kind of just really learn one thing at the end of the whole thing. Like we would talk about a lot of different things, but I felt like if I could get my listeners to remember one thing, I would have succeeded. So I kind of crafted the questions around this one thing that I hope you folks learn. Try to keep that in mind as we talk. Like, what is that one thing I'm trying to get you folks to understand? So my guest is Rich, and if it starts sounding informal, it's because Rich and I work on a project together, so it might kind of get a little jokey at times, so I apologize in advance. I've known Rich for maybe, it feels like a long time, but it's probably only been like 3 months, but we spent pretty much multiple days every week together. So I'm really curious about his answers to some of these questions too, because I really don't know this part of him as well as I think I should at this point in our relationship. So, like as most good stories go, let's start at the beginning. Where are you from? And tell me about what it's like growing up.
So I am from here. So I was born in Kukiolani. I'm sure as many of you guys have been as well. I grew up behind Rainbows Drive-In. So there's like a little apartment building right behind Rainbows. So every morning it smelled like the smell of just like fried rice and omelet and the boneless chicken. You know, that was growing up. Our family business here is a Petland, which is like a small pet store over by Kahala Mall, thereabouts. So that's kind of been our family business, how we put us all through school. If you ever did buy pets or pet food from there, it literally did put us through school. So thank you. Yeah, so that's kind of more the beginning side of things.
Like, you know, where everyone in Hawaii understands the importance of family. So like, tell me about like your parents and grandparents. Are you like a 5th generation local person, or like are you an immigrant somewhere in your family?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a split. So on my father's side, I'm 5th generation. So my great grandfather immigrated here, so 4th generation rather. And my mom's side, my mom immigrated from Taiwan when she was in her 20s. So it's get a really interesting cut of both.
Can you share a little bit about the differences you saw between the 5th generation local family versus like that 1st generation immigrant?
Yeah, boy, it's like the 4th generation side gets along much more easily. But you know who people are, and Hawaii is such a relational place, right? Like you know someone who can help you with various issues. But like the immigrant side is the one that at least resonates more with me, because I feel like you see what. So take a big step back. Why is it the case that, you know, out of the Fortune 500, you know, the founders of these companies vastly disproportionate tend to be from immigrant backgrounds, right? And that's incredible, because oftentimes these are people who have like poor English, like don't know anyone, and oftentimes no money, right? So it speaks to a very successful culture that those folks in general have. And so for me, that it resonates even now.
Can you share about what is it about those cultures that resonate? Because my parents are also immigrants, so I kind of understand what you're saying, but I feel like instead of the culture, it's like the kind of person that would decide to leave where they grew up and where they knew to go someplace completely new. And imagine most of these people, it's pre-internet, right? Like you didn't know where you're going. There was no Google Maps. So you just gave up everything to come to like a new place. Like, what was it about, let's say your mom's side, right? Because she was an immigrant. Like, what is it about her story that resonates with you?
Yeah, it's that Silicon Valley call it hustle, but it's this idea that even though they don't have much, like through sheer willpower, they will make things happen, right? There's nothing quite like having, you know, burned your boats and moving here, knowing that you got to make this work that provides that powerful motivator. So like my mom, her first thing she did here to make a living was to, and this was going to date me, but Taj Clubhouse. I don't know if anyone still knows what that is. Okay, so Taj Clubhouse. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. So just imagine like it's like a less successful version of Hello Kitty. Maybe that's a good way to think about it. I'm not sure, but anyway, there's like a local branded business here, and my mom was selling stationery for them, so selling like pencils and erasers, like as a traveling salesperson for like pencils and erasers, right? Like who does that? Immigrants do that because they don't know what else to do, you know. But like they'll find these gigs, they'll try them, they'll give it their best, and then realize maybe that's not the right thing to do, and then they'll shift, they'll try other things. But there's an underlying work ethic to that. There's just it's very hard what those guys do, but you know they succeed in doing it nonetheless.
Did observing your mom try to run her own business, and then also seeing your dad with a successful operations, been around for generations, did that kind of like craft how you decided what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah, it had a very significant impact. I would say that maybe like two stories that come to mind. So the first is that, so my mom growing up would say that in America, to make money, to build wealth, you need to start a business. And at the time, of course, you have no idea what they mean, but it turns out between just the way that equity compounds as well as through the tax code, it is severely advantageous for folks to own businesses. So that's one. And second is actually just even on the other side of the family. So that pet store, of course, had to start somewhere. And so my grandfather, I'm sure some others in the room here, was in the 442nd. And once he came back from World War II, he went to business school, of course, here at UH. And he started the pet store we had like apparently a little bit of a warehouse in Chinatown, but he put a bunch of goldfish in plastic bags and tied them up, put them in a wheelbarrow, and just like wheeled that wheelbarrow out into Chinatown. Like, that was the start of Petland, right? And there's like a scrappiness in there. It's like no one, he didn't need to wait for someone to tell him like, here's how you do it. He was like, look, here's what I have available. I think I can try to make this happen. It starts from the very like humble beginning. So even if he wasn't literally an immigrant, I feel like there's an immigrant mentality that was still pervasive, in the way that he thought about things.
When you think about their work, like, do you think of it as like, God, that was so rough or difficult? Like, I would never want to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that these guys, oftentimes, I feel like, I don't know how you feel about this, but like starting companies, a lot of it's eating glass, right? You're doing things that you don't like doing. You're not very good at it. But nonetheless, you got to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And it helps to be able to like anchor yourself back on some other memories, or perhaps like a familial memory, right? Say, look, there are some people I know very close to me who've had to do much harder things than this, right? And it enables you to take that step back, say, actually, this isn't so bad, and then keep doing the glass eating that you were doing previously.
So you graduated from Honolulu?
Yes.
When you graduated high school, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do as a career?
I assumed, and I think this is probably the case for a lot of folks here, I assumed I was going to be just working in the pet store.
Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to aspire to be something that you have never seen before. And that was the world that I knew. Right? I grew up in working in this pet store.
Okay. But that really wasn't your career path though, right? Like after high school, where'd you end up going?
Yeah, so I went to Georgetown out on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And so at Georgetown, first thing you realize is that it's in Washington, D.C. It turns out that your choice of city is at least as impactful as what school you go to. And I'm sure the international flavor of UH is probably something you guys all see as well. But for Georgetown, it's all about politics, right? So I started off in the business school there, thinking that, I'll probably work in a pet store later. Right? So I learned something about business. But then also after a couple semesters, switched over to like the foreign service school, like their government kind of school. Simply because this is what all the interesting conversations around the dinner table are around, right? It's like so-and-so getting elected. This was during W. Bush. So there's a lot of interventionism going on in the Middle East. Like all the interesting stuff that's happening in Washington, D.C. kind of get bitten by that bug. So I thought I might be a diplomat, because that's what people do when they're in that school. So I spent a semester in China, or a summer in China, that kind of dissuaded me from that path, and I kind of got back into the business world. I can keep going on that, actually.
Yeah. you went in thinking you were going to come back and run a pet store. Then you were going to be a diplomat, right? So when, let's say you graduated, what did you decided to do?
Yeah, so I think so there was the fork in the road there was I was thinking about doing one of two very, very different things. On one hand, I developed a business plan to export veterinary equipment to China under a thesis that you can see how there's just one thing you learn about running a pet store is that, man, if you don't have kids, pets are your kids, you know, and people are willing to spend on their kids, right? And so you could see how that was starting to take off in China. And so of course, like, even if there wasn't much of a market for it at the time, like, you could see how that was clearly going to be expanding. There wasn't very much happening at that time there. So that's that was like a business plan number one. And then actually the second option was to take a job to work for a consulting company called McKinsey. And so that was a very different path because it was a job, but I ended up taking the latter, really with the belief that I feel like, a good chunk of entrepreneurship is really about understanding yourself. And at least at that time, looking at myself and realizing that my Chinese was awful. I have no business experience at all. Just like looking yourself in the mirror. So you need to have confidence in yourself. You also need to look yourself in the mirror and say, you can or cannot do this. And so it just felt the right decision at the time would be to take the job.
And this job was not in the US, right?
That's right. So it was based in Taipei.
Taipei. So you're someone who grew up in Hawaii, went to go to the East Coast, and decide to do like the opposite of what immigrants do, right? Go back to like the country where your parents came from, with not strong language skills,
yes,
right? And take a job, right? This is like you did the immigrant story in reverse. How was that? Like, that was very brave. Was it easy? Was it hard?
So this is a funny story that I haven't told much. So okay. So all right. So I did this interview process. So McKinsey, it's a very fancy kind of consulting firm. So they flew a bunch of people to Boston to interview us. So I did the interview process, 4 different interviewers. All 4 of the interviewers forgot to interview me in Chinese. One of the 4 was supposed to do that, and for some reason or another, none of them did. So I got past the interview process, got this offer letter from them, and I still remember like getting this offer letter. I'm like, oh wow, it's gonna pay $1 million Taiwanese dollars. It's amazing. Run upstairs to my computer, million divided by exchange rate. Oh, this is like $30,000. So, but nonetheless, it worked out. But then, thinking about like McKinsey itself, like when I landed there, and like I met like the office manager, and like she of course spoke to me in Chinese, and she was like, you could see the shock on her face, like, wow, this guy's Chinese is really poor, like really bad. Like, what are we gonna do with this guy? So that's how I got started in Taipei.
How long did it take for your Chinese to kind of get up to a level where people didn't make faces at you?
I'm not sure it ever got to those languages are really hard.
Yeah. Especially business language, right?
Right.
It's very different than just colloquial language. So how was that time? Like, what did you learn in your time in Taiwan?
So consulting is a really interesting path, and for anyone who's considering it as your first job, I'd highly encourage it because the diversity of work. So I spent 2 to 4 months working in Tokyo, then Shanghai, then Hong Kong, then Beijing, then San Francisco, Tokyo, Singapore. Like you just get to every couple of months, someone just drops you into a completely different context and says, here's this business problem that you may or may not know anything about in the country you probably know nothing about. Help them, can you be relevant for them, right? So it forces you on this learning curve and an ability to understand that you know nothing, and the humility to be able to ask questions to try to figure things out for them. So that was the biggest thing with this consulting role, is really understanding that you need to figure things out for yourself.
Mm-hmm. You said you were in a bunch of cities in Asia as well as in the US. Like, over time, did you notice a difference between the companies you were consulting with in Asia operate versus the American companies?
Yeah, there's a number of differences. I would say like the most striking one is really so in China right now, there's a very common phrase called, in the tech world, called 996. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. So the Facebook and Googles of China, their standard working hours is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And that is just standard. And working in Asia, that was my typical working day was probably 10 a.m. till midnight, like Monday through like Friday. And then I'd probably work on Saturday or Sunday for at least half the day. And so like, there's a real difference in expectations around work. And of course, it's not to say that this is a universally and unanimously good thing. Obviously, there's a number of consequences that come from that. But I think that in the US, we don't understand how hungry the rest of the world is to achieve the quality of life that we take for granted. And that will have consequences for us because they're doing great out there in Asia. And we're still a little bit complacent in the way that we think about things, generally speaking.
So this is not just like McKinsey culture, like it's just all the companies you work at or consulted with?
Yeah. Except for the European companies who are trying to do things in Asia. They are probably even more chill than the Americans.
Oh,
yeah.
So did you learn any kind of like lessons from seeing other people like face their challenges that you're like, man, if I ever start my own company, I gotta make sure I do this right. Like, was there a common thread that you kept seeing people struggle with?
So, I mean, because like the McKinsey business model it's a relatively expensive model. And so you only are consulting for relatively large companies on their big problems. So you don't get to see as much of like the startup phase of things. But every now and then you get to hear great like startup stories. So for instance, there was I had a chance to speak with the founder of a very large Chinese solar panel manufacturing company, and asked him like, what's it like to start a manufacturing company? It was like, and then he described a bunch of problems. But the one that I remember is that he said, yeah, and we finally manufactured our first batch of solar panels. We're really excited to like sell them. We already found a customer for them. But then like the trucks didn't want to pick up stuff from our factory because we're a little bit out of in the middle of nowhere. And so like, so we rented 250 school buses. We just got the solar panels onto the buses, got them imported that way. I'm like, wow. Right, in terms of that spirit of we will figure this thing out, right? Like no one's just going to hand you the answer. You have to be willing to kind of wrestle that out.
So they didn't just complain to the company and say we need to pick this up. They actually found a solution.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Jeez. So how did you then go from McKinsey working with these really large multinational global companies to like deciding, you know what, I'm going to stop doing all that and then start a company?
So I always had the idea of starting a company in my head going to McKinsey, and so at least in McKinsey is generally viewed to be a very good prep school, for those who want to start their own companies as well. So at least that was the reputation it has had and probably still has. Yeah, and so I think the thought process, actually the first conversation I had that really helped me understand how to use those 3 years, as someone that I met who's from Hawaii, who I just happened to meet in the Taipei office, he was there for another project. And so I asked him for advice, and he said, these 3 years are going to go really fast because you're going to go to all these different countries and work on all these different problems. Know what you want, because if you don't know what you want going into this, you're going to allow like the 10 winds to just pull you in different directions, and you're going to kind of come out of this process 3 years later and say, oh, that was really fun, but I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. And so knowing that I want to start a company, I did prioritize getting into working for an industry where things are chaotic, where like a lot of things weren't yet set. And so it turns out the first thing I got to work on was helping to start McKinsey's solar practice back in 2007. So solar, of course, today is still relatively early days, but 15 years ago, it was like kind of like the dark ages of solar. And so I started working on solar then and just kept doing more and more of these solar power projects, helping Asian manufacturers usually, helping figure out what do they want to do here, right? Because there's a lot of similarity between manufacturing a flat panel TV and a solar panel, turns out. And a lot of manufacturers at that time were trying to figure out how to get into what was clearly going to be a secular growth trend. Just no one realized how significant it was going to grow over that time frame.
So was there something that made you decide that now is the good time to start my company, or is this 3 years were up?
Yeah, it's an analyst program, so it's like a 3 years or up kind of thing. Okay. And yeah, it's one of those areas that I also believe that recognizing the privilege of having enough savings to be able to take risks, which is should be mentioned. But given at that point I was in a position to had enough savings, I had $80,000 at that time. So not like a vast portion, but like clearly enough where I could like be very not worried about running out of at least being able to pay for rent and like food. So then the thought was like take risks, right? Like at what point in my life will I be more able to take risks than now? And the thing that's always scared me, it blows my mind, is like folks who, I just realized you might be in this bucket, the folks who like start their company after they have kids. That scares the bejesus out of me. Like the idea that like if I don't make this sale, like I may not be able to feed my kids next month scares me. And you got some older kids, you might have been in that bucket.
I started the restaurants at the exact same time I started having them. So this isn't about me, it's about you, man.
Yeah.
So that, okay, where did you start the company? You started in Taiwan or?
So I had an idea coming out of McKinsey, but really, I actually thought that I was going to continue, just, maybe I started a company in China.
Okay.
And it just turns out I had a family thing come up in Hawaii. And so I need to make a decision about whether or not to come back here or to continue building my career out there. And so that was a tough call, but it ended up coming back here for a year and worked on some family things. And then after that family thing, then I moved to the Bay Area and started the company.
All right. So what kind of like skills did you think, based on your work at McKinsey and now like coming to start your own company, like what was really important that you felt like your employees at your company understood about having a startup and running a successful company?
Ooh, well, I can say like some of the obvious things that we didn't have. So I think the thing that shocks me the most about universities, and it's funny saying this to a university, is that I see Sandra bracing herself. Okay, so look at any business school, right? So like there's a marketing department, there's a finance department, there's an organization department, right? Like all makes sense. Like the one department that I have never seen a university have for its business school, a sales department. And that is crazy when you think about it, because what is the one thing that every single company needs to do is sell. And so it turns out that from a university standpoint, no prep there. McKinsey also has a very interesting culture around sales. It's very allergic to the concept of sales, in fact. And so coming into starting something where I feel like all you do as a founder CEO is you sell, right? And it's different flavors of sales, right? The obvious one is looking for customers here. But actually what you're spending the other 50% of your time doing is you're selling partners, business partners. So I'm partnering with, why partner with you guys? Who the hell are you guys anyway? Selling your investors, right? Because you're trying to convince investors like, look, there's this big thing that we're going to do, and we're going to be the team to do it, and that's why you should give us X millions of dollars to, even though we don't have anything right now, right? Like that's a sales process as well. And then hiring, right? And like hiring is like you're talking to someone who's like working at a big tech company, and they're saying like, look, yes, you have a really good, comfortable path already, and you're going to do great if you keep going there. But trust me, jump off of that cliff here and join me and do this thing where it's going to be like, we started off in my living room. There was like 6 of us, right? Like all sharing like the living room with my sister and her friend who was dog watching, right? Like, so, right. But like you're selling all the time. That is like the essential skill I think that founder CEOs need in order to build anything. And yet there's like very little prep for that. In fact, it seems like almost like a thing you're not allowed to talk about within a business education context.
Quick show of hands, who understands what a sales funnel is? You're right. You're right. Ooh, I mean, like, yeah, it's just one of those things. And so I don't even know how one should teach it, but I do know, man, like learning it, if you're going to start something, it's like, if there's like one thing to learn, like that would be it. New class, Andrew. Sales. So from McKinsey, you got to see how other businesses operate. You found the market you wanted to operate in. You didn't learn the sales side, right? That was lacking. Was there something from like growing up with your family business that you brought to your company, like a certain skill that you think people should have?
Actually, my experience here has been so. Does anyone else, just show of hands, like work in their family business? Like, do I have a family business that they? Okay, right. So at least for me, like all I did was like I walked dogs, I like washed dog cages. Like there was nothing really like building a business, and more of us like your parents telling you, here's what you're gonna do today. You just go do it.
The dirty work.
Yeah. The voluntold to like to go do stuff. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess maybe that is a lesson in itself, right? It's like there's a lot of like unpleasant things that come into and you're not doing the things that are like the exciting things, like, you know, helping someone to like choose what puppy they want today, right? Like maybe that's the exciting thing of that of a dog store, like, or a pet store. Like more memorable is like
Cleaning the dog cages.
or like there was one time we had to paint the stores at night because of course you don't want to do it while customers are there. Turns out there's a lot of other insects and creatures that live in pet stores. They'll come out at night. So yeah, there's a lot of like unsexy things, right? That I think that we all do in that context.
You mentioned a little bit about that Asian culture of like working really hard. Like, did you bring any of that into your own company as well?
Yeah, I think it was hard to avoid, but of course you've got to calibrate to the culture that you're in. Actually, on that line, like when I was working at McKinsey, there was a time we worked for with American colleagues before a Taiwanese client. So we showed up. I showed up there, meeting these American colleagues, and of course they don't perceive me as coming from Asia because I speak just like them. And the manager of the project was like, look, every Thursday evening, we're going to need to do a call with Taiwan. And that's just the way the time zones work. So I'm sorry, you guys are used to flying home to your home offices, right? So we're all in San Francisco, but some of them were from Cleveland, some of them were like Houston. Like you're used to flying back to your home office on Thursday evenings. You can't do that. We're going to have to fly back on Friday morning instead. And in Asia, we're working like Monday through Friday, and then like probably a good chunk of Saturday. Like I was like, yep, sounds good. And then but the American colleagues are immediately like, ooh, I don't know. And I was just so surprised and manager like, look, we really need to do this. I'm super sorry. And then someone's like, look, my dry cleaning, I need to do it. If I don't do it on Fridays, then my whole weekend's gonna get messed up. I was like, oh my God, like, and like, of course, like the Silicon Valley version of this, it's like, there's a lot of perks that I think that we all kind of, or many of us in Silicon Valley have gotten used to. And then you go to like China and then you see like, wow, they operate on a completely different time scale. And there's a reason why they're doing so well over there.
It's really interesting because I've had a chance to work with you with a few months. And if you were to ask me to describe like your leadership style, I would not say like, oh, you're a slave driver, you work 14 hours a day. Because oftentimes when we're in meetings, your kids are in the background, right? Or like first time we met, we just went for a walk almost to the beach. We're going to go to the beach. It's high tide, even except. So you have this work ethic and this desire to work really hard. And you come from cultures of immigrants where it's grit, it's about working hard. We're at McKinsey in Asia where it's like work a ton. But yet I feel like your leadership style is a little bit different. Like, could you describe when you're running your company, what style do you prefer to use?
Yeah, and I think that style is the exact right word to use there. It's like to recognize that different tools for different situations. Mm-hmm. And in America, when you're working with like educated folks who are used to a certain way of being managed, like it's more about inspiration and understanding like what does this person need to develop to become even better at what they do. Mm-hmm. But you need to be more of that mindset. Whereas in Asia, it's the way it works is like maybe I'll use an example. Like there's a very well-known semiconductor company that I was working for. And everyone in that company refers to the founder by only one word, and it's not the person's name, it is God. Like, like that is literally how everyone refers to that person in the company, right? It's a charismatic founder CEO. And so, of course, in that culture, like this guy says something, and there's 10 people taking notes saying, we will do this, right? And that's just how you run a business in Asia. Like that is the culturally appropriate way of running the business there. And if you tried doing the American thing there, like people would laugh at you. If you try doing the Asian thing here, I think people would laugh at you, right? It's like, so if you want to be effective, you need to understand like, who are you working with? What are they accustomed to? What do they want out of this working relationship, right? And so I think that, especially having been in the US for the last 10 years, it's probably forced a hard pivot to understanding more of like the American style.
Yeah, so you seem very adaptable. And it sounds like it's working, right? So you have a startup, you grew it from a startup to a successful Series A raise, right? You want to share the amount, how much you raised for your Series A?
So Series B, we did 20 million.
Yeah, 20 million would be. And then you decided to come here.
Yeah.
What brought that about? Like, where you're like, yes, 20 million, I'm good, and I'm done, and I'm in Hawaii. So what are you doing in Hawaii?
It's that simple. Yeah. I mean, so one thing is that I feel like I I believe that yes, there's a lot of reasons why people want to go to the mainland to work. A lot of good reasons, and we can talk more about those. But the vast majority of people who spend a significant amount of time here are going to want to come back. At least I believe that because I certainly feel that way, right? There's something always missing when you're on the mainland, and you don't really care about the place that you're living, right? And it's like I was living in San Francisco, right? And like the city is not doing that well. It's just continued to go downhill actually the longer I was there for. But I didn't care about it, But if things are not going well here, like I care. I feel like that is a unique trait that we have here in Hawaii, is that there is a genuine community mindedness that we're kind of all imbued with, for better or for worse. And so yeah.
So you moved back during the pandemic.
Yeah, and it was it started with a very prosaic thought, right, which is that let's come back here because there's no childcare left in San Francisco. Like everything was closed. We just had our first baby. Trying to make that work was really impossible. So but 1 month became 2 months, became 3 months, and yeah, very quickly started realizing, yeah, there's a lot of good things about being back home. Of course, like people are nice, but the first thing I noticed coming back, there's children. In San Francisco, there are no children in that city. And yeah, Jonathan's laughing because he knows it's true. And the reason for that is, I'm not joking about this. You can Google SF poop map. And there is a map that is dynamically updated of all the poops that people are finding on the streets. And so you can just look that up. And every day I had a 25-minute walk to and from work, and I would pass by at least 2 human poops on the street. And every other day, a needle, just on the ground. You just cannot, and so now that I have kids, I'm like, oh, that's why there's, you can't have kids, they touch everything. Like it just would never work. But Hawaii has children. Like there's children everywhere here. And everyone's lives to be centered on it.
So remember how I said I had a theme where I wanted to come from one thing? It wasn't SF poop map. I think it's going to be SF poop map. No, thanks very much. So you're back, but you're not kind of sit still kind of person. You want to tell us a little bit about this program you made? Not mine, not the one we're working with, the other program that you made, and why you decided to make that program.
Yeah, so yeah, this program, so I've subsequently started learning this is perhaps a very controversial thing. There's something called movers and shakers. So it's and so one is that I've had tremendous co-founders for it, so I'm definitely not the only one. But in that first month I was here, so this is June of 2020. So as you guys probably remember, like it was scary, right? Like 99% less tourists here. All the streets are empty. There's a real question of like, what are we all going to do for a living because we still pay for gas, we still pay for all the other things we need to pay for here. And so the thought was, coming from San Francisco, I was like, look, there's a lot of like very well-paid people who would love to live in Hawaii, and they'll bring a lot of income here, they'll spend it here. On a dollar spent per person coming to Hawaii, like having one remote worker is going to be a lot of value, just from that standpoint. And so my wife and I, we wrote a 5-page Google document of silly things. Or just like if you were from the mainland, you have no idea about anything in Hawaii, like, yes, you can take an Uber. We have Uber in Hawaii, right? Like you don't have to like ride a horse or whatever crazy things sometimes mainland people think about Hawaii, right? So we just created this really simple Google document of like, here's how you make transition to Hawaii. We asked our friends at the various big tech companies to post it, and it went viral. So we were just like on the phone quite a bit of the day, just like telling people about internet speeds in Hawaii is actually fine, that sort of thing. But it was through that I then got to meet the 9 just tremendous leaders here locally who were able to just take this thing to the next level. And so we found 50 free plane tickets that were donated by Alaska Airlines and United, I believe. And yeah, we offered 50 free plane tickets. And we had 90,000 people apply for 50 free plane tickets to come here during like the dark days of the pandemic. Just like putting Hawaii more on the map as like a place that remote workers really could come here and thrive with. So that was the project they worked on. But I guess like part of the thing that really opened my eyes though is that, so as an example, like there was a Facebook group, I won't forget, it's like called My Kailu or something like that, where like the folks over there they posted a Facebook message saying, or a Facebook post saying, Movers and Shakers is giving out $50,000 of taxpayer dollars to like any remote workers that move here. It's like, wow, there is like nothing about this that is true, like nothing. But of course that goes viral, right? Because that is the internet that we all have. And so, yeah, it was a really interesting experience of trying trying to find ways for us in Hawaii to benefit from, find like the silver lining in what's clearly been like a really tough time that many folks have been having.
So even during a time where people were struggling, you were still trying to find a way to kind of create solutions. And these aren't easy solutions, right? Like it wasn't just you doing this, it was multiple organizations coordinating. These are large companies like Zippy's,
Island Insurance.
Island Insurance. These are big companies with really strong leaders, right? So it probably took a lot of effort to corral everyone to kind of agree on what you would do.
Oh yeah, no, and I was definitely not the person to have done that. It was yeah, but it is the other folks. I don't know anyone here locally, but they are really, and I have so much respect for like Zippy's, Island Insurance. Like they're willing to do things that are unpopular, right? Like this movers and shockers thing. Everyone knew it's like, look, the idea of bringing in remote workers at a time where like no one wanted anyone to come to Hawaii. It was a very unpopular thing, and they knew it. And these are not companies where they're serving mainland clients, right? Like Zippy's is as dependent on brand perception here in Hawaii than anyone. But they're willing to put their neck out there when they had really no benefit directly, right? It's like they don't have remote workers who are buying $1,000 at chili every day, right? Like these sort of folks are really willing to step up, and it's really inspiring to be able to work with them that way.
Yeah, and I think that program has evolved now, where instead of trying to bring folks here, what they're doing is they're teaching like cultural classes for people who move here to kind of acclimate better to Hawaii and the many benefits as well as the many challenges they have when moving. So I think they're pivoting in the right direction. So we're running low on time. So we have 5 rapid fire questions. And like, sorry if anyone was annoyed at this. I did not say the name of his company. This whole interview, I did not mention the name because rapid fire question number 1. Is it KWH or kilowatt hour analytics? When you say the company's name, what do you say?
So one thing I've learned about myself in this entrepreneurship process, I'm terrible at naming things, like just awful. Like KWH analytics, like half of our clients are still like kilowatt analytics. Like some people I meet are like, your last name has neither K nor W nor H in it. Like what is this? Because like it's just a terrible, terrible name. This is why I was not involved with naming our children. I do bad things with naming things. So it's kilowatt hour analytics.
Kilowatt hour analytics, perfect. Okay, now you all know what the name is. Question number 2. Are you an ask for permission or ask for forgiveness?
Ask for forgiveness. I used to be an ask for permission person, but being in startups, you learn that that's the only way to get things done.
That's me. All right. Along the lines, what is the riskiest thing you've done in your life?
Riskiest thing. I'm not a very risky person, actually. Like I would really struggle. I don't bungee jump. All that stuff. Like, and so actually, I have my wife observes like, look, you're probably one of the more risk averse startup founders I've met.
Really?
Yeah. But I've also heard it described this way. It's like, look, as a startup founder, everyone thinks that they love risks, but actually, like most startup founders hate risk. Like our job is to like make things work, and oftentimes what that means is you're trying to figure out like what are all the reasons why this won't work. Cutting those out so that look, there's a shot at least this thing will happen.
I would say taking a job in Taiwan is a pretty good risk. So that's a good one. You're in a startup. I would like to start a startup. I have a hard time picking ideas. So here's this question. What would you consider to be a big TAM? And for those of you who don't know what TAM is total addressable market. How big of an opportunity does your business have to succeed? It's kind of like what's considered a good size TAM.
So a year ago, prior to like the bubble kind of deflating, it used to be you had to show a TAM of $10 billion or more in order to be considered like venture track.
10 billion. 10 billion, everyone. All your ideas have to be $10 billion. So no small like necklace business or anything like that. All right, last question. What do you believe that most others would disagree with? Spicy.
I have a bunch, yeah.
Spiciest one.
I hate rapid fire questions, but this is a really good one. I believe that most Americans don't work enough. I think this is probably not a surprise. Like I think that we have gotten comfortable, and I think that most of us don't realize it until you go work in some of these places where they're a lot hungrier than we are.
Yeah, everyone's lazy. Guilty. I think we're running out of time. I was going to ask you guys what you thought the big thing was, but because of the SF poop map thing, I'm just going to tell you. Just because I need you to remember this and not SF poop map. Okay, think about what you think it is, right? I'm going to tell you and tell me if you got it or not. The theme is just do the hard things. Anyone get that at all? Or did anyone get poop map? No. Right? Like the idea is like having your own company is not easy, right? It's going to be hard. And we live in a culture where things are really easy and convenient to get, like next day delivery, same day delivery, instant gratification from anything you need. But like we have to remember, like startups, what we're trying to do is we're trying to fix big problems. $10 billion. That's not going to be easy. Otherwise, everyone would do it. And you can either see the hard things and say, you know what, that's not for me. Or you could be like, let's get stuff done and let's do it, right? So just do the hard things. If you said they're hard, like, yes, I'm in the right place. If it looks easy, you're probably not doing the right thing. Good. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for paying.